Welcome to the RCA channel one more time, viewers. I've got some cranksets in front of me here, and you might be wondering why there's so many. We've got a bit of an interesting one here. We've had so many questions from people over the years. I get asked this question multiple times a week. When you change crank lengths, are you going to lose power? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are you going to gain? What are you going to lose? It's highly individually variable in my experience, what you're going to gain, what you're going to lose. So what we've done here is we're going to do a bit of a test. Michael Redding from Creative Cycles down in Melbourne has graciously lent us 4 sets of these beautiful carbon fiber O'Leary X310 cranks. And Michael, I'm going to do my best not to chip or break these because I've promised him I'm going to post them back to him when we're done. We've got different lengths here. We've got 170 2.5s. On the bike already, which I'm going to be doing my testing with, I've got 165s. We've also got some 160s and a 155 little guy here on the end. You can see the difference in the length of these two cranks. So these 155s are obviously terribly short for someone who's 5'10" like me, you would assume, and therefore you would probably assume that I'm going to lose some power and that sort of stuff. Well, we're going to find out. There hasn't been a lot of testing done in a well-conducted fashion in my experience with the different crank lengths. As an individual rider, you'll get huge variation in how you react to these, and I'm going to add my data points to this, and we're going to do a test protocol. I've got 2 people involved in this project, which is myself and Craig, who's currently behind the camera filming. Now, if you've ever seen Craig and you've ever seen me on a bike, we are completely different physical specimens. Craig has got a much more muscle on him. He's much more neuromuscularly orientated as a rider, really big sprint, less of a cardiovascular rider. I'm the exact opposite, super lean, all about cardiovascular power, and I've got absolutely no sprint whatsoever. So this will be really good because we're going to have 2 completely different people testing the same crank lengths with the same protocol. And our goal here is essentially to see a couple of different things. The big questions we always get asked: am I going to lose my sprint power if I go to shorter cranks? We're going to try and determine whether that is the case. Will I increase my cardiovascular efficiency is the second question. We're going to also try and answer that question. So the test protocol that we've designed here is hopefully going to cover both of those bases. And I'm going to run you through it now. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this on a kicker, and we're going to have a 10-minute warm-up to get the juices flowing, followed by 4 10-second maximal efforts with a 5-minute recovery between each one. These are going to be flat-out efforts. I'm going to try and start from a certain cadence, which will probably be a cadence of around 60 RPM. And I'm going to try and wind the gear right out to the highest cadence that I can, and these are going to be maximal effort sprints. 5-minute rest between each one. After we've done those 4, we're going to have a 10-minute rest, followed by 2 30-second all-out efforts with a 10-minute recovery in between. These 30-second efforts are much more neurologically fatiguing than the 10-second efforts, and they're going to really cook me. So I'm just going to do 2 of those. If I'm feeling really good, maybe 3 to get another data point. After that, we're going to have a 5 or 10-minute recovery, followed by a 30-minute zone 2 cardiac drift test. So I'm going to basically sit at a specific wattage. I'm going to get the kicker to hold me in zone 2, and we're going to watch my heart rate with the different crank lengths and see if there's a difference between them. So the theory here, or the idea here, is that we want to measure neuromuscular changes in your ability to generate instantaneous force with shorter cranks, and we also want to measure whether shorter cranks give you some sort of an efficiency gain when you're doing a cardiovascular effort. One of the things we did consider putting into this test was a flat out 20-minute effort, up a climb or something like that, or on the kicker. We've moved away from that idea because your fitness and your form each week are going to vary. Some weeks you're going to be a little bit more tired than the next, or a little bit fresher, and that 20-minute effort is really heavily affected by your fitness and your form. And I'm not entirely confident in my ability to maintain exactly the same level of form across 4 different weeks with 4 different crank lengths. So we've skipped that one. What we're going to do instead is the cardiac drift test to try and see if there is a measured improvement in efficiency in a zone 2 load. So that's the theory. I've roped Craig in to help me with this. He's also keen to see if there's any great difference. We'll run all 4 of the different crank lengths, and in between each change, I'm going to try and ride for a week with the cranks, and then try and do the test on a Sunday or a Monday, a consistent day of the week. So I've got 7 days of adaptation to the shorter or the longer crank in this case, before I have to do the test. So another thing you want to look out for if you're testing this yourself, you don't want to just jump between the different crank lengths on the same day or the same, even like 2 days apart, because you will need a little bit of time to adapt your position and a little bit of time to adapt your neuromuscular system and your patterning of your leg motion to get used to the smaller crank arm rotation or the bigger crank arm rotation. So I'm thinking that a full week of adaptation followed by the exact same test with each crank length, and hopefully we'll come up with some useful data for you guys. Now this is going to take a bit of time to run this test, but I thought I'd let you know what's coming down the pipe in the RCA here. I'm also very interested in the comments. If you guys can leave some comments on if we should modify our test protocol. I'm after feedback, whatever you guys think, I will take into account. I promise I'll read all the comments on this one. And I'm really, really interested if you think that there's something that we've missed out. But the 10-second, the 30-second, and then the cardiac drift test across a 30-minute zone 2, I think that's going to give us some really interesting data points. And it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with the different crank lengths. I'm also interested if you guys have some predictions, put them down in the comments. Do you think the 155s are going to be better or worse with the sprint power in particular? I'm fascinated to see. We're going to be examining all the data from this right at the end of the session, and that will be obviously a video that's going to come out in sort of 8 or 10 or 12 weeks when we've collated all the data, and we'll see what happens. Once again, thanks very much to Michael Redding for loaning us these beautiful O'Reilly X310 cranks. And Mike, we will try not to break them on you, mate. I don't think I'm in any danger of breaking them, but I'm more worried about Craig.